Hello, and welcome to the Inovia Conversation. I'm Steve Waltz.
And I'm Jeff Pergelski.
And I'm back for my first podcast since it was hijacked last time, Jeff. You got me back.
I did. That was Holly and I had to do something while you were gone. You're almost never gone, so the opportunity doesn't present it. We had to jump when it did. But who do we have with us today, Steve?
We have Mark Rhodes from New View Strategies. Hi, Mark.
Hey, guys. So deeply thrilled and honored to be here. I miss seeing you guys at conferences. I know you have so much fun with your podcast, and I'm really thrilled to spend a few minutes with you. So thanks very much. But Steve, I'm anxious to know, since your podcast was hijacked, how much did you have to pay in ransom to be back on?
Yeah, usually when Holly hijacks a podcast, since she has an extended family, she gets a lot of listeners. So when they look at the stats, they're like, we don't need Steve. But, and they were extremely nice to me. I felt bad because when we hijacked it from Jeff, we weren't as nice. But that's another one-off.
I'll see what I can do to help you set the record on this one. How's that?
I like it. Yeah. Let's do it, Mark. So yeah, let's hear all about Steve. And I, of course, know you from your years in the channel, but for those that aren't familiar, tell us a little bit about your background and what you're doing these days.
Appreciate that. How long we have? About an hour and a half, 2 hours?
Well, Donovan has the record for longest podcast, but feel free.
I can't take that away from him. But a lot of people that know me know I have no problem just talking for quite a while and rambling on. Sometimes it even makes sense. But so, yes, I'm Mark Rhodes, and I'm with New View Strategies. We are a partner who's not a partner, which confuses a lot of folks, and rightly so. We are also users of Business Central, of course, but what we do, our lot in life, is really to support and share the love of Business Central and NAV, and specifically for customers to improve what they do and how they use the system with the system they already have. So we technically are a partner, but we don't resell the product. We are not a value-added reseller like Inovia. We also do not have any applications like some of the add-on applications. We provide business process consulting and training, and have been doing that for, I think, about 4 years now. Me in particular, I've been a partner and a customer over the past several decades. And most recently, before New View Strategies, I was the general manager with Dynamic Communities, overseeing the NAV and BC user groups. And so that's how I've gotten introduced to this incredible community and gotten to know some great folks like Steve and Jeff and the folks at Inovia, and have enjoyed working with you all for a decade now. I think it's been almost. So yeah, there's where I'm at.
Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
And I see your title is Chief Strategery Officer.
I am in charge of strategery.
So tell, what does that mean, Mark? I was kind of curious when I saw your title.
For our listeners of a certain generational group, they won't understand that reference, and I encourage you to go look it up because it's a good one. And what does that mean? I have a hard time answering this one because, as a smaller team, it's whatever's needed to help us, like I said, spread the love for BC and NAV. And so I oversee our training program and how we structure our classes and run our classes. I participate quite a bit in the sales efforts, certainly in marketing. I've done website updates. I've done our social. I work with our new team members. I'm certainly very much involved still with the community and our participation in that. So the conferences that we do and the support we give to the local user groups, it's really all over the board, which is a lot of fun. But when you have a to-do list of 1,000 items and you don't feel like you ever get anywhere because there's so much on there, but it's a lot of fun.
Great, Jeff. Yeah, you asked a good question earlier. You're on a roll. I'm going to let you go.
You're going to let me go. Well, actually, I sort of wanted to dive deeper into the title, since we were asking Mark about his, but I see that yours, Steve, is just customer engagement specialist, but that doesn't seem to do you justice in our organization. So you need like 17 words. Mine, I think, is pre-sales what am I, senior pre-sales and licensing specialist, and then in parentheses it says and podcast host with Steve. No, doesn't really say that, but all right. So you mentioned that what you do at NewView as an organization, not you personally, maybe, but also maybe, is that your training and consulting and business processes. I guess, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges to BC users in that space? I know that I'll just throw my 2 cents in that we see a lot of times where the people tend to avoid training. You know, when we've got a budget for an implementation project, they're like, let's see, we don't have quite enough to do it all. Where can we cut? And it's like, it seems like training is one of the first things that gets axed.
Always.
So you guys deal with that on a weekly, monthly, daily basis?
I've lost years off my life talking about that. I before I dive into one of my favorite topics, though, and you hit right on it, I just got to throw this proposal out there. Steve Waltz, CES. It sounds like a TV show, right? Some sort of crime show. I think we can make a go of that. Maybe we could write up a script, send it into someplace, Netflix probably, right?
Oh yeah, he's quite a handsome guy too. I can see.
Oh, well, gosh, Jeff, I'm going to have to buy him something new now. And you know, when all the officers got new titles, I told our CEO Alan, I said, I have my new title. He goes, "What's that?" I go, "CBO." He goes, "What's that?" "Chief Bamboozling Officer."
There's no bamboozling on this podcast.
So just real quick story. When I first met my wife, I was selling cars. I was out of school, changed my major from accounting to business during a recession, right before the stock market crash of '87. I'm aging myself here. Oof. And I meet her mom for the first time. Hi, Linda. And so they're watching Scrabble. We're watching on TV, and the phrase was, "Car salesmen tend to do this." And her mom's like staring at me, right? And the word was bamboozle. I'm like, I'm going to bamboozle your daughter.
You're just lucky that it wasn't. It started with a B and it didn't have it had an S in there, maybe. But that's what I would have guessed as terms of what car salesmen do. All right, now Steve, please.
Family-friendly term.
Yes, Steve. Let's let Mark speak on this podcast. I can't remember. What was my question again, Mark?
Well, okay. You're going to have Steve talk about his car salesman days at some point too, right? That's got to be a source of some great stories. All right. Not to get any further off track. Yeah, let's talk about training. I don't know if you saw my expression in the crestfallen and how my shoulders slumped, Jeff, when you talked about, it's one of the first things that gets cut in a project. And it's fascinating to me, and it's fun, and it's disappointing all at the same time that we've gone through decades of this happening, and it still happens, right? And you kind of understand it from there's the reality of business, right? You only have a certain amount of time to get a new system in. You got to keep the business running at the same time, right? You're looking for the most efficient way to get it done. Yet, you guys know this, so hopefully you can back me up on it, right? The top 2 reasons implementations fail, right? Lack of training, lack of testing, right? And so very, very tightly integrated. And for me, it really always comes back to take a big step back, take a look at your training approach, your training culture, your continuous learning culture at an organization. You spend so much of your time and money in your employees and in systems, right? And why wouldn't you want to optimize your investment? Classic kind of MBA approach to it, right? If you're going to invest the money, why not look for the highest return you can get out of it? And why not spend a little bit more to get a whole lot more return? You're already in it for a lot of money. Why not add a little bit more there? Make sure that you go all the way to make sure that the employees know how to use the system and can take full advantage of it, right? And then fostering that culture as well, where they're encouraged to experiment, to learn, to investigate, to try to improve. It makes zero sense to me to put a system in, train them up once, and then assume everything's going to get better magically, right? It just doesn't happen unless you put some effort into it. That's how life works. And so that's always interesting to me. If you take an honest assessment, what percentage of a common analogy is what percentage of revenues do you spend on marketing, right? That's changed substantially over the past couple of years. Marketing has become so much more important, right? We've moved to it from a sales-oriented type of approach to a very heavy, marketing front-end type of approach. And there's a benchmark for your industry out there about how much you should be spending on marketing. You should look at learning the same way, because again, you should be optimizing that asset that you already have with just a little bit more investment and making sure you're fostering that culture. So that's a long-winded circle, but that's my approach and why I'm so passionate about it. We find that there's different situations and we have different approaches for those different situations, but bottom line, figure out what works for an organization's culture and where they're at with their system. So, we certainly like doing training ahead of time so that the folks feel prepared as they're getting ready to go live with their system. But guess what? They're going to forget things. They don't know how to use the system the best to their abilities and for their organization when they first go live, right? There's ongoing adaptation that happens, right? So why would you stop training right at go live? Really needs to be continuous process. And we put a lot of work into this as well, because training adults is a science unto itself. The research into training adults goes back 140 or 150 years. Urban Ebbinghaus first put out the forgetting curve in the 1880s. That at that point, I have a great way of measuring this, but basically said, 80% of what adults learn, they're going to forget in 30 days. And if you think about it, what can you remember from 30 days ago, right? Not very much. You certainly can't remember many details, right? And so, when people get trained, they're going to remember what they can use on a daily basis, and they're going to forget a whole lot as well. So we really push for refresher training, do regular updates. Holly Kudel, one of your own, right? She used to do lunch and learns at her old company, right? Very successful concept with that. Get everybody together once a week, just share, hey, here's something I learned about the system this week. Here's an opportunity I saw in terms of how we could use the system better, for this particular process. Those things are so critical. And again, continue to improve the ROI that you have, in that asset that you already own. So there's a lot that goes into that, but we're, like I said, big fans of that ongoing refresher training. And sometimes a company realizes, gosh, it's been quite a while. My team has fallen into a rut. Let's lift them out. Let's really open up their minds, and we'll put them through a whole boot camp. And we can talk a little bit more about our private training in a minute, but we'll put them through the whole boot camp. Sometimes it's a particular topic, right? Hey, I know that we're not using all we can with the account schedules and the financial reporting capabilities in Business Central. So we've got those classes too. We've got 65 classes to pick from. So, wherever a company's at with their particular use, we can meet them with that.
One thing that you said stood out, and you said it multiple times. You said the word investment.
Yeah.
He said asset.
Uh-huh.
And the conversations that I have, and we have as a company with either our customers or people in the user groups, and one question I ask a lot is, how do you view your ERP system? Is it an investment or expense?
Yeah, right.
And
very telling.
And it is, because everybody wants to say investment.
Yeah.
And most do. But there's that mindset to where, well, like you said, let's just get installed. Get them trained and then go. It's not a zero-sum game. It's, it's like we talk about the capabilities of your smartphone. Like, my gosh, I was watching a YouTube video and all these shortcuts. I'm like, I had no idea that it had the capabilities of that. And, the neat thing is that having conversations with end users is that, especially if they have an older system, they might have bought the system 10 years ago. And those people that actually scoped out the project or got the original training aren't even there.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even touch on brain drain. Yeah, exactly.
And so if they created workarounds, now you got a new person coming in there. So, a question I always had is, and is talking about that training. I mean, how do you open up conversations with those if they reach out to you saying, okay, we need help with this? I mean, I'm assuming the conversation could be, let's get a really, let's find out where you're at, because they might think they need training here, but you just, in that conversation opens up, you're like, whoa, they need training in a lot of areas.
And it's always the case, right? It's very seldom that it's that refined. So a couple different ways, but it brings to mind our short company description that we have on our homepage. The very first sentence is, we work with frustrated NAV and BC users, right? Because that's typically what happens is they get to the point they don't understand how to use the system. So guess what? They either get frustrated, they're using workarounds. Now you're circumventing, again, that whole investment you've made in the system. Instead of optimizing it, making it efficient, focusing on value-added activities. Yeah. So in terms of the scoping and so forth, it really is an art, because again, if the company is very wired as a learning culture, right, and they're doing ongoing training, that's one thing. If they haven't invested in training in a long time, then it's okay, what's the area of highest need? let's attack that first, right? Let's go for an 80-20 on that, and try to get them over a few humps to make a big difference right away, and then start chipping away from there. So a lot of times we're talking to a CFO, right? Because of our background, right? One of our founders is a former controller, Microsoft MVP, Carrie Peters, and she, of course, knows the finance processes and how Business Central can support that. So a lot of times we're talking about finance processes, and often you can make a few tweaks and save days of time every month. So that's a beautiful thing about Business Central. And then a lot of times we're talking about, of course, operations. Our other founder, Kim Congleton, decades in supply chain, and in particular warehouse operations. There again, you can make a few changes and make significant differences. And Business Central is a beautiful tool for a lot of different areas, including those.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So if I could, and that was my awesome was a nod to Steve there. Everyone always is. So I guess one of my questions, do you have any special tools that you use in terms of training that you find sort of specializes for the adult learning environment that you're working in?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, because I touched on our inclusion of adult learning principles into our approach. And not that it's not productive, but a lot of times folks think that, well, if somebody knows the software, they're going to make a good trainer and they can train effectively. And that is not the case, right? There's two very different things. Knowing how to do something and then being able to train on it, very, very different. And so we incorporate, again, a lot of adult learning principles in terms of our approach, how we structure the classes. And I'll talk in particular, we had to, with this past year, we used to do all our classes in person, and teaching in person and then teaching virtually 180 degrees. We had to break down all our classes and reconstruct them to work in a virtual format. So I'll give you a particular example. In person, you can teach 8 hours a day. You can lecture for longer. You can do more lecture at a time. You can incorporate, of course, the small group activities, right? It's a very different flow to the day. Now for virtual, we've moved to where we're going to do a demo. We'll do 1 or 2 slides, then we're going to do a demo for about 15, maybe 20 minutes. Then we do hands-on exercises for about 15 minutes or so. We really do try to even out the amount of time that we're doing instruction, formal instruction, and that hands-on time. Because that hands-on time, that's where you really do learn, right? You get to experiment. Everybody gets their own individual training environment. You get to play with it. You get to make mistakes. And then we debrief from that. So we'll take a look at what people have done, have them explain it, talk about, hey, that was a good thing. Here's something you missed, and go through that. And of course, in a virtual environment, 4 hours in a training class during the day, that is as much as people can handle, period. We just won't go past 4 hours because forget about it. It's useless. So really, really different formats in terms of doing that. So we spend a lot of time in hands-on exercises. We've got, we really incorporate gamification to make it fun. Still try to foster that networking as much as we can in the class, which is, again, tough in the virtual environment. We're all trying to be on webcams and get to know each other a little bit. And we do a lot of, checkpoints as we're moving through as well. So those are just some of the things that we work on. This past class, we just did Controller Foundation Boot Camp at the end of March. Yeah. We actually did some one-on-one coaching sessions afterwards because we realized, right, when you go to a training class in person, you get those breaks where you can go to the instructor and say, hey, we got this weird situation at my company, on my team here, and we've been struggling with this, right? And in 5 minutes, you can really turn on some light bulbs. So we set up these individual coaching sessions after the class to foster those same kind of discussions, because otherwise they don't have that opportunity. So it's been challenging, as you guys know, but we really have enjoyed that challenge and being able to reorchestrate, our approach to it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's another question I had, and this could be for Steve as well. What do you think of the percentage of people that we're all working with that have been through an ERP implementation in their life? Like because for me, as a demo resource, I can tell the people on the demo who are asking questions. I can tell the ones that have been through an implementation before, and it seems to me like it's maybe 25 or 30%. But I'm just wondering what you guys think, because as I'm thinking about the decisions that are made in terms of the budgeting process and all, like how someone who's been through an implementation before would realize the value of training more so than someone who didn't. So just curious as to percentages. If I don't know, Steve, have we been involved in an ERP implementation at Innovia? I think we've been blessed not to have.
It's dangerous to even mention that thought, I think.
They're mapping out. They're doing process mapping now for a new system, but I haven't been through one. Well, wait a second. We've kind of been through a CRM implementation, dynamic CRM. We went to from ConnectWise, which is more ticketing, but also we do run Business Central, and we got to create stuff and through there. So, but it's so similar to NAV that it was, that was an easy transition. So. I don't know if that counts, Jeff.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. So what do you think, though, I know you are working with as someone who's prospecting for new people to help. What do you think the percentage breakdown of your customers are in that, or the prospects you're working with? How many of them have been through an ERP implementation?
You hit right on it there, Jeff. Honestly, I have no idea from a percentage standpoint, but you're absolutely correct. Those have been through it. They either know why it was a success because they spent enough time in training and testing, and everybody feels comfortable, and they feel comfortable with how to get their jobs done day one, and you've flushed out all the issues, or really good portion of them, or they've been part of a not good implementation, and that's exactly the same for the same reason. So, market difference. And you guys will resonate with this. When I was doing consulting before, the thing that always drove me nuts is, folks would pay a lot of money to have me help them, right, with this implementation or whatever project I was working on, and would provide them advice and based on many experiences and many projects, and then they say, no, we're going to do it differently, without any real reason other than we're just watching our budget kind of thing, right? There's the reality of the numbers, of course, but don't spend all that money for an expert opinion and then just completely ignore it. That never made any sense to me. So
that's a good point, because we actually when D365 first came out, and Microsoft being the marketing machine that they are, it's just like QuickBooks.
Yeah, right.
It's really not like QuickBooks. It's a complicated animal. It's an ERP system.
Yeah.
And we tried to kind of go into that market, but they all wanted to cut the training, and they just thought, they wouldn't need that much training. And it got difficult because, we charge for our training and they didn't want to pay for it. They thought it should be part of the software. And it's like, well, this isn't QuickBooks. And, just those conversations were kind of tough. And when, we've actually have turned folks away that want to do just install. We're like, well, you need this. And they're saying, no, we don't need it. We're like, we might not be a good fit for you because it's not going to be pretty. And, it's, having those conversations with potential customers or people that have, the biggest, when I heard this, when Tom brought me on, that 30% of all customers in the United States that use NAV or Business Central change partners on an annual basis.
Right.
I was in shock. Right. And Microsoft even said that number might be low.
Yeah.
Which is kind of scary. But the biggest pain point I heard outside of my partner doesn't call me back is lack of training. Just, that's how we got in that conversation about, well, how do you view training? Is it first off, it's not only a necessity, but when Jeff, you made a comment about if they're new to ERP, they might think there's only one way of doing this or doing that. And it could be multiple. Well, there are multiple ways of doing it.
With just about everything. Yeah.
Just about everything. And so, then they're like, well, why do I have to invest in, discovery of these conversations? Well, aren't you trying to automate and improve your processes? And I'm sure a lot of those, do you have a lot of those process conversations when you get into the training?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly it. And I'm going back to your quote there in terms of, the partner churn and everything else. And I did when I was back with Dynamic Communities one year for our conference, I did a big survey relative to the partner client relationship. And it was very interesting how that particular point came out. And guess what? How many customers were so much happier with their second partner, right? And why is that? Because, back to Jeff's point, once you've been through an implementation, you understand and right? You know what to ask, what's important. It's the same with the clients. They get to the point, they get frustrated, and it's always on both sides. Always. That's just the way it works. It's always on both sides. But once they get to a second partner, now they know more how to work with the partner, and they know what they're looking for and what to ask and how to get more out of that relationship. So they're always happier, which is, it's a shame that has to happen for that to go that way. So, I love talking about that topic, but that's we can get into that in another conversation, hopefully.
So if you were knowing what you know now, let's say there's a CEO or CFO out there and they're getting ready to go to an implementation of BC. How would you coach them if you were an outside consultant with no skin in the game to say, look, you want this to be successful, this is what you should do? What would you tell them?
Probably spend about 50% of your time on training and testing. That's number one.
That's a big number.
The best implementation I've ever been a part of was such a joy. It was such a fun project, and it was solely because of that. And I got to tell you, it's just all about that investment, right? It's pay me now or pay me later, period. The people have to learn the system. So do you want them to get comfortable with it, during when it doesn't matter, when it's not going to hold up production, when you are not going to stop sending out orders? Or do you want it to happen in a live environment when you're under the gun and boxes are stacking up in the warehouse? I mean, take your pick, right? And so when it's a safe environment, you have the opportunity to make changes and adapt your business processes and all of those things, take the time to do it.
Do you know that number was that big, Jeff? I was thinking 25%.
Right. Well, thankfully, I'm not involved in the budgeting side. I just have to show the software. But that was, another question I guess I had for Mark in terms of when you're engaging with, or for our, listeners who are thinking about, I think every organization probably in some aspect needs some training. But are there things that they can do to prepare for training, before you get them in a class, whether that's virtual or in person. What can they do to kind of prepare the users and for getting the most out of it?
Yeah, great question there. Since we've been talking mostly about implementations, I think about that, but really there's not much of a difference. It applies anytime. It's just, it's a little bit of homework beforehand in terms of thinking about really what are your personal objectives, and not like, I want to become a better person type of person, but, I'm struggling with these types of process, or I'd like us to achieve this, or, I'd like to streamline our month-end close, for example, right? You think about what those objectives are for the training and for your involvement in the training. Share those with the instructor, because if they don't know what you're after, it's hard for them to gear the discussion and the activities around that. So share that. And then by all means, be present, right? We, when we're in person, we make a huge deal about this. We say, please, please, please turn your phone off, close your email, tell the office you are not available. We're going to have scheduled breaks at this time, at this time, at this time, and we give them plenty of breaks during the day. Deal with email and everything else that you have to, right? That's the reality of it, but deal with it then. When you're in class, be there, be present, be focused, be thinking about what's going on, be thinking about how to apply that to your team and to your business processes, right? And same for virtual. We do structure it that way. Of course, it's, I can't tell you how many conferences I've been trying to watch a full session, right? And I'm still getting pulled away because you're sitting in front of your computer, of course. But if you're going to half invest the time, invest all the time, make sure that you're really mentally present and getting more out of it. So, and then I'd say do the follow-up too, right? Don't go to training and then just go back to how you've been doing things, right? Make notes, do some takeaways, write down those ideas, get back and talk with your team about it. Hey, what if we did it this way? Let's look at this. Go ahead and share some of your learnings. Hey, here's a shortcut I discovered, and have the follow-up. Because again, why else are you doing it?
The internet has really provided a lot of resources. And when I'm talking with either our customers or prospective ones, I'm like, do you know there's a Dynamics YouTube channel that Microsoft has?
Right.
And a lot of them are like, no. And I'm like, the amount of, videos out there that now you have, docs at Microsoft.com, right? Where, customer sources kind of going by the wayside. Mm-hmm. But the amount of information out there, and why I brought that up is what you just said. Yeah. It's not a one and done.
Right.
It's that mindset of, are you going to be, if you have the mindset of being a lifelong learner, that, in getting content and, change management. The first time I went through change management, you used to realize that some people would just fight it to the death. I mean, they don't want to change. Mm-hmm. It's just the way it's going to be. Work around it. That's just the way it is. Not that they're affiliated with the owner of the company or anything, but it could cause those. It could cause those issues. And do you guys coach that at all when you're talking with your customers? Your approach sounds like you do. You're very structured. It sounds like it's great. And when you're, I'm in the mindset too, where I told my wife, I said, if I don't want to go to a restaurant and be restricted. And, I think of my brother, like, I'm not spending that buck on a cheeseburger. I'm like, well, don't go to the restaurant. Right? When you're there, I'm going to get what I want. Right. And the mindset is, when you're involved, like in your training class, you I guess, coaching them, post-training. Right. Are you pointing them to other resources? How does that work?
Yeah. So quite a few thoughts around that. Absolutely. Got to equip them after the fact. And so every time we're pointing them to additional resources. Frankly, we love handing out resources, tools, checklists, spreadsheets, anything that we can, so that they have that to reference back to. And of course, they get copies of all the slides we go through, the hands-on exercises, everything that we go through in class. They get copies of all that. And, in particular, one is just a memory mechanism, right? Because if the more you have to look back on, the more that's going to help you retain that over the long haul. And, a little bit selfishly, people really, really like that, right? So why wouldn't we provide that for them, and just makes their experience all that much better. So there's not only that, there's just really the follow on. And again, this just really circles back to the continuous learning point. Just fostering that culture of making it a regular thing. And it's interesting, I mentioned private training earlier, and let me circle back to that real quick. We saw a dramatic shift in people's approach to training over the past year. Very traditionally, it's been for somebody who values training, for a company that values training, okay, everybody put a training plan together. What do you want to do this year? And they kind of look into the future and they kind of plan that out. Then everything changed, and we went from nobody was going to schedule anything that far out to all of a sudden we have an immediate need and we need the class starting tomorrow kind of thing. And so we went from a very big public schedule to doing a lot of training as private training for a team or for a company. And it was just such a dramatic shift last year. It was very, very interesting. So we're still doing a lot of training. It's just in a very different format or from a different perspective, really. Now I see that easing back a little bit to where people are starting to plan out a little bit, and we're able to put that schedule out a little bit. So that's been an interesting transition over the past year, and I think we're kind of settling in the middle there, which is nice.
And speaking of class, I know you're doing a security class for us.
We are doing a security class, yeah. That's another thought. Talking a lot about implementations, you guys have always heard about the infamous phase 2 list, right? That would be another statistic, Jeff, to see how many phase 2 lists actually get done. What do you guys think?
Like 3%.
Right? And I'm a big fan of phase 2 lists because, frankly, you can't do everything, or you don't want to do everything as part of an implementation that you ever want to accomplish with the system. That's crazy, right? So yeah, put it on the phase 2 list. But then I got to get back to the phase 2 list. And that's something that we have been doing more and more, as well as helping companies get to their phase 2 list, because it's a very pointed, all right, we want to focus on this particular area and get this knocked out, right? And we like doing milestone-based approaches. And training is a heavy element into that as well. So we like knocking those down. So this class we have coming up is Security and Permissions in Business Central. And it is June 8th, if my memory serves. I don't know if you guys have the date handy, but I think it's June 8th. And advertised on the Inovia training workshops list there. So go check that out. But what a perfect phase 2 item, right? Security is never right out of the gate. It's hard to do because you're not really comfortable with how everything in the system works and what everybody needs access to or doesn't need access to, right from the get-go. So you always get it close enough, and then you put it on the phase 2 list to come back to, and so many companies don't. And we're finding more and more, especially this past year in the virtual environment, a lot of companies are at a big risk because they don't know who's got access to what, and should they or shouldn't they, and all the bad things that can happen. Not necessarily loss of money and other kind of criminal activity, although of course that can happen. We've got some stories to share on that, but just people making inadvertent mistakes that cause downstream effects that can cause a couple hours to fix, right? That's not necessary. So we've seen a huge demand this past year for our security and permissions class. And so, grateful to be partnering with Inovia on that and to offer that class up. Great class to go through in terms of understanding the right way, how to use the tools within Business Central very effectively, and talking about resources. We've developed this checklist that really simplifies the approach, because if you go with the Microsoft permission sets that come out of the box, they're not going to be right. And there's like 80 of them. I forget how many. There's a lot of them. It's hard to make heads or tails of it. So we've got this spreadsheet that we walk through how to figure out who needs what as an initial going in position, how to use the permissions recorder to fine tune that and update that. So I hope people can take advantage of that class.
It's good to hear.
Yeah.
Most people, when they invest in securities, when something bad's happened, it's one of those things you would be
Right.
kind of proactive on, right? And I can't tell you, and Jeff probably sees it more than I do. When we onboard a customer, how many of all their users have super user rights, and you're like, this person can see anything they want. Do you know that? They can.
So scary, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh.
They can change pricing, change credit limits. Like, yeah, they can have full. Oftentimes, when I'm in the demoing Business Central, I will touch on, we'll go, I'll show them, Business Central has this robust security and permissions infrastructure, but I don't, go all the way into telling them that you could spend, 40 hours a week just maintaining that to get your people to do the, to have just the right amount of access to the system so they can do their job, but they don't access anything that they don't necessarily need to. And I know there's some ISV products that help in that, but I think we're all about empowering end users to get as much out of the system as they can. So certainly taking advantage of learning themselves how to use the tools that Microsoft gives them is aligns well with our philosophy on that.
You hit on a great point there, Jeff, because Microsoft has invested in that particular area over the past few versions, right? And, that's another, I don't know if it's so far as a pet peeve, but, Microsoft continues to invest a lot of money in this product, right? They continue to enhance it. For an average company, who's in charge of going in and figuring out what are the new enhancements, the new features and functions with a new release, and what is good for the company, what applies to the company, right? I don't hear of many positions like that or those kind of activities. So again, continuing to improve your return out of that investment. You have new functionality. Nobody knows about it there. You're not taking advantage of it. Again, continuous learning culture, figure out, Microsoft makes it pretty easy. They issue those release notes. We do a bunch of articles and podcasts and so forth every time a new release comes out. A bunch of partners do. Just invest a little time, figure out what's new and what you can take advantage of, and get the team trained up on that.
Great. It's a good topic for a podcast, Jeff. I think we've actually, we're investing more on educating our customers on security. And I know we're coming up on the time here, and we do have a coupon code for 10% off for the training course. And the neat thing is when we do a training course, the fee is not per person, it's per company. So you can get multiple people on it. So all you need to do is reach out to your account manager, or if you're an Novia customer, and they'll get you that coupon, or you can reach out to Jeff or I, and we'll make sure Angie sends you a coupon code for that. We're excited that that's coming up.
Yeah.
And I think coming up on the time here, Jeff, any other questions you have for Mark before we let him go?
Let's see. I've got a trivia question. So you're a Florida Gator guy, right?
I am.
So how many teams, or how many, I should say, universities? Oh, look at there you go. Had more draft picks in just this past weekend's draft than the Florida Gators?
How many universities had more draft picks in the what was it, 3 or 4 rounds of the draft?
Yeah.
Had more, 3.
Really good. But the answer was 4. So I will give you, some bonus points there. Steve, guess how many draft picks they had from your alma mater?
The same amount as Michigan State.
Michigan State didn't have any. Wow.
No.
Bowling Green. Come on, even like my Badgers had 4. Florida had 8, and there were it was Alabama, Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Georgia that had either 10 or 9 draftees. So.
Georgia. Wow, I missed that. It's hard for me to see Georgia, so
and I thought my Bears killed the draft, and the same day Aaron Rodgers said he's not playing for the Packers. That's a sore subject for Jeff, I'm assuming. But my gosh, the fact that the Bears could have the best quarterback in the division, thought I'd never lived to that day. And I heard they're changing the name from Soldier Field to Soldier Fields.
All right. Well,
Anyway, that's for the quarterback they took. So that,
why is that? Oh,
they-
because it's just yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
half the people call it Soldiers Fields anyway. And but anyway, Mark, you can find information about NewView on our website under our ISV partners. And Mark, your email is mark@getyournewview. Is that correct? .com?
GetYourNewView.com. That's right.
I think you should put a Get Your New View on.
Hey, I better go see if that's available.
and then you have to say it a little differently, like with a little more swagger or something. But get your new view on.
Well,
See a theme song building and everything. So yes, we appreciate you joining us. And Steve, anything else to close us out? Any final
besides
thoughts?
looking forward to seeing you at an actual live event. That'll be exciting. I always every time I see you, I think of the Burn Steakhouse. That was a fun night.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Yes, let's go back to Burns.
Let's go back to Burns. So, well, Mark, thank you very much. And your website address is it newviewstrategies.com?
Or getyournewview.com. Yep.
Awesome. All right, Jeff, this podcast is
Thanks so much, guys. Always a blast and really great questions. I appreciate it.
All right.
And it's over again.